In this video, we're going to take a look at evaluation technique in CIE economics. The stuff I go over in this video is also applicable to other exam boards, but the early part of this video is going to focus on the specific CIE requirements. Now, the assessment objectives in CIE are very similar to the other exam boards. You have assessment objective 1, 2, 3, and 4. Rather than read 1, 2, and 3, I'm just going to skip ahead to 4. And assessment objective 4 is to critically evaluate information, arguments, proposals, and policies, taking into consideration relevant information and economic principles, and distinguishing facts from hypothetical statements and value judgments. Assessment objective 4 is evaluation. We're going to take a look at how that breaks down by paper. Now, the first part of this, paper 1 and paper 2, is in the AS year. And you'll see that if you follow this chart across to the final column, for paper 1, only 10% of your marks are going to come from evaluation questions. And then you'll see for paper 2, about 25% of your marks are going to come from evaluation. That changes quite a bit when you get down to paper 4, which is about 30% evaluation. So you can see that in A2, evaluation becomes more important. And in AS, it's a little bit lighter, but not that much. So it's very important to start building this skill in AS, and then this should prepare you well for fine-tuning it in A2. These are some keywords that indicate you need to evaluate. When you take the exam, you see these, you must evaluate. Anytime you see the word evaluate, that's obvious, or discuss, or to what extent, or assess, comment upon, criticize, these indicate that you need to apply evaluation skill. Now let's look at what that is. How do I evaluate? And this question I get a lot as a teacher. I know students every year struggle the most with how do I evaluate? The knowledge part is pretty easy. You guys know how to put out definitions and explanations. Application is not tough, but once you wrap your mind around it, it's okay. Analysis makes sense, but it's the evaluation part that seems to always get economic students hung up on how to do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you several points about how you can evaluate, and hopefully this helps you in your studying. One way you can evaluate is to rank the strength of your points in analysis. So some of your analysis will be more convincing than other parts. And the way I always get students to think about this is to consider if you were watching some kind of courtroom drama when the lawyers are going back and forth and they give evidence. Now, not all evidence is equal. Some evidence is more convincing in the case, so lawyers might focus on the more convincing parts of the evidence. That's the same thing you want to do when you evaluate. You say, I've given you all this information, but here is the one thing that I think makes this argument the strongest. Here is something that maybe not as strong, and here's the weakest point might be this. Second, you should consider what is the immediate impact or the short-run impact, and what's the long-run impact of your decision. Something might not necessarily be effective in the short run, but prove beneficial in the long run. It might be both beneficial in short run and long run, or it might be beneficial in the short run and not the long run. So this is stuff you should evaluate depending on the question you get. Also, you have to think like an economist in the sense that you understand that the world is changing, the environment is changing. So your answer is based on certain assumptions being held true. And you can introduce those assumptions. You could say this will be effective in XYZ conditions. If XYZ change, then this solution may not be as effective. So you really should be able to think a bit broader and wider about the different factors that could influence your decision beyond what you've already stated. If you're looking at an elasticity question or any kind of economic data and you're asked to offer an opinion on it, it's very important to look at the reliability of the information. Generally, you could probably question how it's collected, what it represents, who's gathered it, how it can be used. Is it a good projection into the future to look at this information? If we use this information, what might happen in the future that could change these things, and so on. And often in economics class, I do get students who are kind of confused and they ask me questions about theory and reality. And you should be doing this in your essays. If I give you, for example, a market structure, some students will come up to me and say, well, there's no example of this. This is not really how it works. That's exactly what you need to do in your essay. Show that, yes, this is the theory, but the real world is not the same. There's all these other things to consider. Look out for keywords such as always, it's always, most, and all. If they're looking for you to argue against an absolute, evaluate the conditions for the situation. So I know that's not very clear, but what I mean by this, um, discuss the belief that firms will always grow in size or growth is always beneficial to a firm. Well, it's not always. It can be in a lot of the cases, but it's not always going to be the case. So you want to look out for those keywords. No, I do not agree that this thing is always beneficial or this will always work. It will sometimes work. These are the conditions under which it may. These are the conditions under which it may not. Consider unintended consequences. What's the harm to the economy? If the government gets involved if the government intervenes, can it result in government failure? Who are the groups that are affected for better and for worse? Think about not just the impact to the group involved, who else around that decision could be affected? And also, definitely consider the opportunity cost of taking a certain action. Yes, if the government spends more money on education, then that's less money they can spend elsewhere. So consider this. If you're looking at government policy like fiscal policy, monetary policy, and supply side policy, and the question is asking you if this is the most effective way at solving some kind of problem, some a balance of payments issue, or addressing an economic recession, or increasing economic growth, they may ask you about one policy in isolation, and your answer could very well be yes, this policy can be helpful. However, it might be more effective if used in conjunction with monetary policy and supply side policy. So offering your opinion in the context of multiple methods of solving one problem but used together. So what kind of combination can you create? Because that really shows high level thought. If you can separate one policy and explain how it works, most students can do that. But if you can really go into how 3 or 2 policies can join together to be more effective, that's a lot of the knowledge, or sorry, the skill of assessment objective 4 that you need to demonstrate. If your question involves elasticity or involves a product or involves something like what I'm thinking of right now is a tax on cigarettes. How effective is a tax at reducing smoking? Well, you can say, for tax, it's very inelastic. Perhaps other measures might be more effective based on the fact that elasticity plays a significant role. If it's more elastic, then this policy may be more effective. And it doesn't have to necessarily just be cigarettes. Think about many different things, right? If you're putting an indirect tax on something, elasticity is something you definitely want to evaluate. And sorry, the same would hold true for subsidies. And also consider more effective alternatives. If the question is giving you an answer, like introducing a indirect tax as the most effective way to reduce smoking, then you would look at, in your analysis, you would look at how it works. Then you could look at other solutions, and then you could offer even more alternatives or a combination of alternatives in your evaluation. Now, the normal starting process is for students to start to evaluate in their conclusion. They normally write this stuff towards the end, and that's what most of you will end up doing. But the more advanced of you will already be evaluating throughout the essay. I think I always encourage students to make a plan. I don't know how many of you actually do this. I'll be interested to see if you leave me a note at the bottom of this video. How many of you make a plan, take those few minutes to do so? But if you're putting your evaluation in there, when you're writing your essay, you can actually evaluate throughout much easier. The problem is many students are rushing at this point. So the time management is more of an issue than I think the actual, taking time to plan. So by the time you get to the essay, you just want to write it. But the unfortunate thing is, as you move to A2, you're losing that 30%, those marks that come from a evaluation for about 30% of your paper. So I would encourage you to first evaluate at the end of the essay, but I would highly encourage you to evaluate throughout. Now, how do you improve your evaluation? This is where a lot of you will struggle. You will say, okay, all this stuff makes sense, but I've actually got to write the paper. How many evaluation points do I make? How much do I write? What do I do? What do I do? The only way to really improve your evaluation is to write and to practice. And one method I would suggest is a lot of students will write the essay, then check the mark scheme. But try checking the mark scheme and writing the answers. There's nothing wrong with starting with a mark scheme, getting familiar with the kind of stuff the examiners look for, and then putting an answer together. Because if you can't even write the essay, evaluation's another issue entirely. But use the mark scheme first to start building your answers. Then you'll be able to stand on your own, kind of like training wheels on a bike. Whenever you see a question, change the form of the question and list all the evaluation points you can think of. This is not for an exam. This is like during practice, homework, and stuff like this when you're studying. If you see a question asking you to discuss the effectiveness of fiscal policy in increasing aggregate demand, then change it to monetary policy, or change it to decreasing aggregate demand, or looking at all sides of that, and then try to evaluate each of those. You really need to get in that evaluation mindset, and then it almost becomes second nature. You'll see a question, you'll know immediately how to evaluate, and that feeling you get when you know the question, you smile, you're going to be very confident, and you'll be all right with it. Additional resources for you all. There are some model essays I've already made videos for on this channel, so you can check those out. They're the CIE, I think it's perfect, how to write a perfect answer or something along those lines. You'll see it. There's CIE model essays there. Also, I have some model essays I've done for the OCR, old OCR exam board. But I mean, if you're looking for evaluation skill, analysis skill, or just general essay writing skill, you can learn from there too. I mean, it's all the same in all A-level economics. How you do it is essentially the same across all exam boards. How much you have to do or what percentage, I think that changes, but generally the skill is the same throughout all the exam boards. And you'd be surprised how many economics model essays there are out there. I have a pack available for AS economics students on my channel, but you don't have to go and get those. You can also take a look at how much is out there. If you want to, I'll include the link for mine in the video description. And if you have any questions, send me a message at enhancedtuition@gmail.com. Email me at enhancedtuition@gmail.com. Tweet me at enhancedtuition. Leave a note below. Because I know that even though I've done this presentation, you have an idea better of how to evaluate, but the trick is actually doing it. So what I want to do is not just tell you how to do it. I want to see you actually learn how. So I want your writing to improve. And help me figure out how I can do that. What are you struggling with? What walls do you hit in revision? How much does this trouble you? Send me any questions you have about evaluation or generally anything for CIE economics. If the more I can learn about your struggles, the better materials I can prepare. So again, please email me at enhancedtuition@gmail.com and let me know. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you in the next one.